Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome, my name is Amanda. Thank you so much for joining me today. Before we jump into today's topic, I just want to call out that I know I have been gone for like 4 or 5 weeks. I've been experiencing some technical difficulties on my end. My husband purchased me a new DJI camera, like the content creator package, and the computer that I've been using to edit isn't compatible with the new high quality footage from that camera. So I've tried like every single way. I've watched countless YouTube videos on how to get my old dinosaur computer to work with the new resolution, and it's just not gonna happen. So I'm in the market for a new laptop. I think I'm gonna get the MacBook Pro 16-inch. That one seems like it comes with a lot of really cool editing software, and it will align with the DJI, I believe is what it is. DJI. I'm not sure. I can link it down below. But yeah, it's a super sleek camera. It's so teeny tiny and cute. I absolutely love it. But yes, I have a whole bunch of videos that have been filmed for you on an SD card that I'm just not able to do anything with. So maybe I'll upload them at a later time. But yes, that is why I've been gone. Here I am. Apologies for not knowing how to use current technology. But anywho, back to the topic of the video. So for today, since it's spring, everybody is excited, the growing season is upon us, I wanted to go over fertilizers. Now, from my perspective, it doesn't matter if you've been into fertilizers since you've been into houseplants, or if you're just getting into houseplants and you want to learn about fertilizers. There's always something to learn, and it's always cool to understand somebody's perspective when it comes to fertilizers. Now, for me, what I've been doing over the last year is I fertilize my plants based on the stage of growth that they're in. So the areas that we're gonna cover today, we're gonna go over pH, propagation, rehab, plants with blooms, so specifically Hoyas in my case, but also like if you had African violets or orchids, this would also be the same care that you could give them. Aroid plants, which is a majority of my collection, so just how to get those large lush leaves. And then at the very end of the video, I'm going to briefly go over dormancy and why that's important for our houseplants, even though technically they don't know that it's winter. So first up, we are going to talk about what I use for every single one of my plants. So this one is going to fall into the category of every single one that I just listed, and that is silica. Silica is really important for every stage of plant growth. It helps your plants build a stronger cellular wall and a cellular makeup. It also helps them be stronger to be able to have more energy so that they can bloom, and it does help prevent against pests since the cell membrane of those plants are stronger. Silica also helps improve your plant's ability to deal with stress. So if you've repotted them, or you've flown them in from somewhere, you've shipped plants into your house, or they are going through a little bit of, I don't know, they've had pests or something, giving them silica is the best way to help them bounce back. This is something that's really awesome too for variegated plants, and that's where I started seeing the most success initially, is when I have like a Monstera albo, for example. I have a couple of all white leaves on my Monstera albo, and they have not browned or anything, and I 100% give that to silica. So if you've been on the fence about silica, I highly recommend it. Silica is something that really does help the overall health of your plant. The next thing that I use for every single one of my houseplants is pH. Now pH is really important because if the pH of your water isn't what is needed for your plant's roots, they're actually not going to be able to absorb any nutrients that you're giving them. So for me, for example, I live in Utah, and the water here is very, very hard. We have very hard water. Due to that, my husband and I have a water softener at our house, and so that means that my water is very filtered, very, very filtered. Like there's literally nothing left of that water to make it soft, and it is very high in salt. So for me, making sure that I have pH and nutrients available in my water is simply because the water that I have isn't viable for plants to be growing and to get what they need from me. So that's why I initially started using pH. I started using, or testing, I should say. I started testing the pH of my water 3 years ago when we moved in this house. And I have seen a huge difference in just the way that my plants uptake fertilizer, the way that they're able to just grow way faster. Like I feel like it's such a more rapid rate. And for the last couple of years, the only thing that I've changed is the pH. Another reason to consider pH, if it's something that you've ruled out because it's just an extra step that you don't want to do, is if you have a lot of different genuses in your plant collection, you're not giving certain groups the right nutrients, and so they're not able to thrive in your care solely because their pH level isn't correct. For example, if you have a lot of houseplants in your collection, say you have a lot of Monsteras and a lot of Hoyas, the pH of those two is completely different. So when it comes to Hoyas, they prefer a 4.5 to a 5 on the pH scale. They prefer their water to be more acidic just because they're used to living off of somebody else. You know, they're aphids, they grow up of trees or in rocks or whatever. And so they're just used to that being a little bit more on an acidic side rather than a neutral side. When it comes to your monsteras, they're going to lean towards wanting a 6.5 on pH to a 7, which is, I mean, it's more alkaline than it would be, or more neutral, I guess. So pH does play a very important role. So if you're not currently focusing on pH and you're only able to get one thing this season going into spring, I would recommend starting measuring pH just so that you can start to give the right pH level of water to your plants. And I guarantee you, whatever else you're doing, whatever care you're already implemented, you will see a huge increase in growth this season just because you're allowing those roots to absorb the water in the right pH for that plant. The last and final note of pH for you guys is that pH is something I add at the very end. So if you have a lot of additives that you're adding to your water, you want to wait until the very end to test your pH. Adding nutrients to your water will change the chemical balance of your water since you're adding chemicals to it. So you just want to make sure that when you do test your pH, you're not testing it right at the beginning, setting it where it should be, and then adding everything else. So the way that I do it is I start with my silica. I add my silica to my water at half or full strength, whatever I'm doing at the time of year. Then I wait 15 to 20 minutes and I go in with my other nutrients. Once I have all of my nutrients already put in, that's when I test my pH. Okay, so now that we've covered the basics of everything I add to my plants, which is balancing their pH and adding silica, the first stage of growth that I want to talk about is rehabs and propagations. Now, what I use for this is Bloom City. This is their clean kelp seaweed fertilizer. The thing that I feel like a lot of people don't know about seaweed fertilizer, or that I haven't heard a lot about, is this is actually phenomenal to promote root growth. So when you're looking to rehab a plant that maybe has rotted and you've had to chop off that root system, or you're propagating a plant, this stimulates faster and healthier root growth just by two components that I don't know how to pronounce, so I'll put them on the screen. Just by having those in there, those two components are what aid in that faster root growth. This is actually a natural fertilizer as well, so it's not going to be as hard on your plants, whereas if you were giving them something else to help them propagate, they wouldn't be established, and there is such a thing as over-fertilizing. So this is something that's really clean, organic. It is rich in micronutrients, which is very important. And when I say micronutrients, I mean like magnesium, zinc, iron. Those are all very important components to a plant that is either rehabbing or establishing itself. And when you use this in conjunction with fluval stratum, chef's kiss. It's the best way to propagate or rehab, in my opinion. Fluval stratum, in case you didn't know, I didn't bring any of it over here. I probably should have. Sorry about that. Fluval stratum, since it's made of like volcanic ash, it's really rich in a lot of nutrients and minerals as well. So this is going to have iron, potassium, and calcium, which in conjunction with all of the micronutrients in this just sets you up for the best way to propagate your plants. So if you're looking to get into props, maybe you have a lot of alocasias and you want to try corms, this seaweed kelp fertilizer and fluval stratum are going to be your best friend. Same if you plan to start shipping plants in online. Like if you're like, you know what, this is the year I start ordering from Etsy. Having this and some fluval on hand to rehab those plants stuck in transit is always a win for me. I love this stuff. This is a new fertilizer for me. This is by General Hydroponics, and it is a floral bloom, and it's a 054. So this is going to be 0 nitrogen, 5 phosphorus, and 4 potassium. Now, when it comes to having plants that are like bloomers, I'm specifically talking about Hoyas, but if you have other blooming plants, take this with the care that you already have, but you want something that's higher in phosphorus because that's what helps support blooms. When you use something for aroids, you're producing more vine and foliage growth. So even though you can use the same fertilizer that you're using for your aroids, you're not going to see the bloom growth or your Hoya being as just lively and vibrant as you normally would have because you're just focusing on maybe putting out tendrils and larger leaves for your plant. So if that's what you're going for, you don't need to use this fertilizer, I guess. This is for blooms only if you want to see blooms on your Hoyas. Phosphorus is the key indicator because that is what's going to encourage the bud formation and making sure that your flowers have longevity to be there and they don't just bloom and fall off and then you never got to see the flower. So excited to see what this one does for me in the growing season. If you've used this before, let me know how it works out. So far, so good, but it is new, so we'll see. The last stage that we're gonna go over is for Aroids, how to get that really big, luscious growth. And for that one, I have two. I should have wiped this off, but I didn't. This is literally right out of my cabinet over there, and it's nasty. So this is a liquid fertilizer. I switched over to this when I started using Pond a couple of years ago, just because I wanted something for my alocasias. But I realized that after I started using it, and I had already purchased this large amount, that it didn't have any calcium or magnesium. So I bought this CalMag Plus to do as an additive. So these two I put in together. So after I do my Silica, I put these two in for my Aroids, and then after, I shake everything around, I give it 5-10 minutes, and then that's when I test my pH, and I make sure that it's between a 6.5 or a 7. It's very important to make sure that you're testing the pH at the very end. Now, the reason you want to make sure that you're testing your pH is, unlike aphids and Hoyas that we just went over, Aroids really do enjoy a more neutral pH, and it helps prevent root rot where they're not sitting in that like acidic soil. So if you have a lot of plants that you just feel like you're not overwatering, but the root rot is there, it's probably because the pH isn't where it should be. And so that's just something that you could rule out to make sure that that's not the reason why your plants are experiencing a lot of rot. So this fertilizer in particular, I don't have anything to write home about for you. I do have a fertilizer in my Amazon cart that's in my saved for later section. That's by Bloom City. They have been, honestly, they're so affordable and readily available on Amazon, and the growth that I've seen just from adding the silica and using the seaweed fertilizer for my propagations has been incredible. So once I use this one all the way, I am gonna buy their 10-10-10 all-purpose like Aroid fertilizer. I just don't want to be super wasteful where I've already purchased this one. I want to use it until it's gone. So I'll put a picture up on the screen somewhere of the Bloom City fertilizer that I want to switch to. It's still a 10-10-10 balance, so it's 10% nitrogen, 10% phosphorus, and 10% potassium, which is essentially what you need. You need high nitrogen. That's what helps encourage large, healthy leaves. The phosphorus being high as well is strong roots and stem development. And that's very important, especially for large leaf plants like philodendron or alocasia. You want to make sure that they have enough support so they're not leaning over and you don't have to stake them or something. They're able to support themselves in the large foliage that you've created in your care. And then the last one with potassium, you want that one to be high as well, because that actually helps prevent diseases and overall plant vigor, if you will. So they're all very good things to have. The Bloom City seems well-rounded overall. Again, I haven't tried it. It's something that once I'm done with this Aero Garden one, I'm going to purchase for myself. But not only did it hit all of the 10-10-10 for Aroids, it also has a lot of micronutrients in it. So I feel like having those micronutrients would just be an extra benefit for the plant, and you would be able to not have to do a two-step process like I'm doing now, because there's so much more nutritional benefit just in that one fertilizer. So this I won't touch on very much because it's just an additive to my fertilizer that's lacking, but this is something that's just really high in calcium, magnesium, and iron. And so it's just really good to help correct any deficiencies in your plant that you have. Typically with alocasias, if you see that you get like the one leaf in, one leaf out, or you have a lot of yellow leaves on an alocasia, they're not getting enough calcium or magnesium, so you could add this in, or you could just switch to a better 10-10-10 fertilizer. Okay. So the last thing that I want to talk about isn't necessarily a fertilizer, and we're just coming out of this time frame, but I do think it's important to keep this in mind as we go into the growing season. So when it comes to plants being in dormancy, now this is something that I feel like might be a little controversial in the houseplant community because not a lot of people practice dormancy. I know that I've said this before, but people will say like, oh, why are your plants pushing out so much growth in winter? And I'll be like, oh, my plants don't know that it's winter. And that's because I feed them full strength nutrients all year long, and I keep their light all year long. Like I never give them any time off to think differently. So it's partly my fault as a plant caregiver that I'm not accommodating them. So when it comes to dormancy, it's very important to remember that dormancy is a natural part of a plant's life cycle. This is something that we should be giving them. You're not stopping growth, you're adjusting it to give them a break and really build up their cellular structure to be available to grow stronger and faster and more luscious the next growing season. So I'm not saying neglect your plants during dormancy. That's not what I'm saying. They still need nutrients and they still need care. But something I would recommend doing at the end of the growing season is maybe changing up how often you fertilize your plants. Instead of doing it every time you water, do it every 4 to 6 weeks. So that way they're still getting a certain amount of nutrients and they're getting those essential components that they need to continue to grow, but they're not being overworked to continue to push out a whole bunch of growth or just continue to keep growing and never getting that break. So if you're gonna pull back how often you're watering and how often you're providing those extra nutrients to your plant in order for them to continue to grow, you also want to pull back the amount of light that you're giving. So I know for me and my cabinets, my IKEA cabinets that I have in my office, they normally run around 14 hours is how long I have those lights on for my plants. And so I do pull that back closer to 8 hours during the winter, just so that my plants aren't even trying, you know, they're sustaining themselves, they're doing well. But I'm honestly really excited by making those two adjustments of how often I watered and how much of nutrients I gave them and allowing them more time to rest. I didn't get as much growth as I typically get over the winter, but I am really excited to see how fast and how much growth they push out since they were able to get a little bit of a break. And I'm hoping that by continuing to use silica all through that time frame, I just built up more of a strong cellular wall and that they are here and ready to party going into spring. And that brings us to the end of how I fertilize my plants based on their growth stages. If you found this video helpful and you enjoyed hanging out with me talking about fertilizer, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. And if you have any questions or any comments, anything that I need to learn about fertilizer, please let me know down in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.